Welcome back. Today's Miller hearing of the Oxford school shooter unpacked a lot of his mental state leading up to the school shooting, which may be triggering for the community.
Yes, we are joined now by psychiatrist Gerald Shiener here to break down some of what we are seeing. Very troubling for a lot of people to hear so many of these things. And with what we were hearing today, we've seen a lot of characteristics that are similar to what we've seen with what people have described for serial killers in the past, torturing birds and visions of harming people. What do you make of some of the things we're hearing today?
Well, there are two things that characterize a serial killer, and one is a lack of empathy for the other person, which allows them to hurt someone without feeling bad. Every doctor has a hard time making his first incision, giving his first shot, poking the patient in the belly, even if you have to cause a little pain to help them, because we identify with other people. Serial killers do not. The other thing is, for people who do things like that, it's a question of their aggressive drive, their hostile drive, and their drive to inflict pain, which we all have to defend ourselves. That's fused with a sex drive. And Jeffrey Dahmer killed his neighbor's cat and talked about getting a warm feeling inside and getting sexually excited when it happened. And so there's a fusion of those two drives that makes people in that situation want to hurt other people to get their sexual excitement out of it.
So we're, talking about this Miller hearing. Rehabilitation is one factor. Can this individual be rehabilitated? When you say things like lacking empathy, can someone like this re-enter society?
Well, those are the things that make one worried about the lack of rehabilitation potential. If you take a teenager, some theories say you can do anything with a teenager if you catch them early enough and you can put them in a position to learn certain things about living in society, controlling themselves, and not resorting to violence. But if someone doesn't have those internal controls or those internal identifications and sensitivities, we may not be able to teach that. And these are precisely the kinds of people that need confinement and can't live in society. They can't live in the general population because they're as driven to hurt other people as we are to have romance and intimate relationships with others.
If you could help us understand what we're seeing here, because one of the things that's hard to kind of translate is the fact that he is very articulate in the way he speaks. He seems intelligent, but yet he is saying things that also make absolutely no sense and having no empathy at all. How does that work?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is being articulate doesn't mean that you don't have a disturbance. And people Ted Bundy, was a law student. He was very articulate. He was very engaging. If you look at the video of him after he's convicted, this is all a big mistake. And the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit that coined the term serial killer talked about interviewing serial killers in prison, and the first few people they interviewed said they must have the wrong guy. This guy is sensitive, he's articulate, and everything else. Another thing we have to keep in mind with this young man, I've not evaluated him, but he is still not an adult. He's not fully mature. And teenagers and adolescents do not think like adults do. They don't have the sophisticated thinking. And then the kind of sadistic, and again, I haven't seen him, but the sadistic impulses that you're describing are the things that drive people to do things. And they may not understand that other people don't have the same kind of thoughts, or other people wouldn't understand what it means to them.
So would you say this is an example of the fact that we can't always generalize what mental illness is or looks like? Because I think a lot of people would see this and say, well, it doesn't seem that crazy to me.
Well, there are different kinds of mental illnesses, and then when you're talking about people who do things to hurt other people or things that are criminal, the law treats people with mental illnesses differently depending on the illness. If there's really a lack of self-control, they might excuse that person's action and try to rehabilitate them in a psychiatric facility rather than a corrections facility. But then there are other kinds of mental illness like this where people are flawed and they don't have prohibitions, or they don't have the controls, and they can do mean things or bad things. They go to prison with everyone else. And that's written in the statute for not guilty by reason of insanity. The mental illness that just means you don't obey the law and you feel entitled to do what you want doesn't get you off the hook.
And we've been seeing, close shots of the shooter today in the courtroom hanging his head low. Does he seem remorseful at all to you?
Well, you can't tell from a visual. Hanging your head may be remorse, but it may just be that he's too inadequate or too startled and too afraid to look people in the eye and confront what he's done. And
He had
really
requested that the witness statements not be read.
Yes, well, it's disturbing to hear them, and if you listen to what some of these people, I've spoken to survivors of disasters like this. I've debriefed police officers who've been in shootings, and the accounts can be harrowing, they can be disturbing, and you go through the whole experience with it. He doesn't want to face that. He may not want to face that, and that would be what's behind a request like that.
Now, we saw also in the evidence that he had requested mental health support from his parents to try to help with this, but he didn't get it. How dangerous can ignoring something like this be?
Well, you see how dangerous it is, there's a theory with people who are going to do something bad. They call it leakage, but really they give hints of what they're doing because they want external controls and they want to be stopped. And when someone asks for help, if someone says they were hearing voices, those things are alarming to hear from anyone, including, especially a child, and there is help that's available. If you just blow it off and say, this isn't important, or you ignore it, someone asks for help, you ignore it, they ask louder. And sometimes the only way they ask for help is to do something that we would call crazy or criminal, and that finally gets them the help that they need.
All right, Dr. Shiener, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And our coverage of this Miller hearing for the Oxford High School shooter continues on CBS News Detroit at 5 o'clock.
We'll continue the conversation with Terry Johnson and Lillian Diallo, and be joined by 36th District Court Judge Kenneth King to break down day one of today's hearing. You
can also find articles and clips from our coverage on CBSNewsDetroit.com. We're going to pick up that gavel-to-gavel team coverage for you starting tomorrow at 9 a.m.